G20. After Africa Chart Toppers, our news and current affairs team will bring you special live broadcasts in 5 different languages directly from Nasrec. And normal programming will resume at 8 p.m. Central African Time. And then on Sunday, the 23rd of November, the Oasis will also broadcast for 2 hours. Tech Africa steps aside for our news and current affairs teams to bring you special live broadcasts in 5 different languages. Then, Planting the Seed resumes from 1 p.m. till 2 p.m. Central African Time. Channel Africa, your window to the continent, connecting you to the world in an African perspective. Global leaders, African insights. Follow the G20 summit with Channel Africa as it happens.
And it is 6 minutes past 8. A very good morning to you. You are listening to Channel Africa, the African perspective, live from Nasrec here at the G20 Leaders Summit, second day, final day as we see what is likely to come out. But I think the big question has now really been answered, and that is G20 Summit Leaders Conference coming out with a declaration. It's adopted a declaration that is, despite the United States waving that big finger and saying to South Africa, do not touch that dial. Don't even think of having a declaration in our absence. And that's been a very interesting development, hasn't it? The fact that the United States was very clear that it's not coming here, it's not sending any officials, it's ignoring South Africa's leadership, and then it changed its mind. President Cyril Ramaphosa making that announcement that the United States wrote to him at the 11th hour, as he described it, to say that they will be attending the G20 summit. And here in Nasrec yesterday, we heard the U.S. delegation being turned away. I'm actually not sure what the final outcome of that was, but it seems like they would have stuck to their guns, South Africa that is, by saying that we are not going to allow you in because you weren't coming, and suddenly you're here at our doorstep. So we've got lots to unpack, and we just have what? Now it is 52 minutes. Welcome to it. I am Tsebiso Makwedla. So just letting you know of some of the issues that we will be looking at. We'll be looking at various aspects of what the implications are of the declaration. So we'll be looking at Global South Agency and whether or not this is about Africa's new personality. Liz Sideropoulos is going to join us in just a moment. She's from SAIA, and Michael Mbewa, our colleague, is here with us. We'll also be looking at the global economic outlook and systemic vulnerabilities. What is possible with these commitments, declarations that are being made here, and climate finance and transition justice. We'll also be talking about inequality, poverty. Let's start with you, Michael. Would you say so far this has been a successful G20 summit, especially with the declaration? I think ultimately all of us were on tenterhooks to say, is this thing going to happen? And if it happens, in what form?
Well, good morning, Tsebiso, but also good morning to our guest here, Miss Elizabeth Astrodopoulos, but also to our listeners in the continent of Africa, but also across the globe. It marks a very significant moment for not only South Africa, Tsebiso, but the globe. Not only Africa, but the globe. I mean, this sets, a new agenda for the new world order. We recall in the days leading up to the conclusion of the G20 summit, speculation of uncertainty, dominated diplomatic corridors. The absence of the United States from the negotiating table had cast doubt on whether world leaders would ultimately adopt the summit's declaration, a document seen as central to the credibility of the first ever African G20 presidency. Delegations braced for the possibility of a fractured outcome that could undermine the spirit of multilateral cooperation. So South Africa had worked tirelessly to cultivate. So we should be proud of our country. We should also be proud of Africa, but also the global South for rallying behind South Africa, but also Europe. We just saw 3 days ago, I mean, Europe affirming, and I'm repeating this, that they are investing in renewable energies. They are also investing in critical minerals. The Commission's chairperson mentioning that it's not only going to be about, it's not only about extracting, but also we should add value.
By beneficiation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, looking at the priorities that South Africa set going into this G20 summit, I mean, these are issues that are affecting not only South Africa or Africa, but the whole globe, where much of the wealth is only concentrated on a particular few. So this is indeed a very significant moment. Hence, South Africa chose the theme solidarity, equality, and sustainability. We need to sustain our planet for those who are coming tomorrow. It shouldn't be that, no, I'm leaving today. You're only here for 100 years. And if you're lucky, how much can you take with you? I mean, how much can you eat? So it's about sharing.
You know, sadly, Michael, how much can you take? How much can you eat? That is what Western powers have been doing to Africa for the longest time. And there is no limit to the gluttony. And I think this is why this is such an important moment for the Global South to stand up for itself, to speak up for itself. So let's look at that declaration. How much is it indicative of that? Is it rhetoric? Is it pageantry? Or are there some real concessions that will... And remember, these declarations are non-binding.
Yeah, I think it will depend on... But we have seen that the consensus has been accepted by an overwhelming majority. But also we should also have... we should leverage and have confidence of what the EU has done with the announcement of the investment. So if you look at the priorities, it's a piece of 4 key, which is about taking action in strengthening disaster resilience and response. I mean, climate change is affecting everyone, more especially we here in the South. We've seen devastating calamities emanating from weather patterns in Mozambique. We have seen in Malawi devastating consequences leading to droughts and hunger. We must take action to ensure that debt sustainability, for low-income countries. I mean, why should it be that you, as the Tepiso, you are from the other part of the country, you go to IMF and ask for $10, the interest is 0.1%. When I go as Gambia, I go and borrow, as tiny as I am, I'm paying much more interest than you, and you are already a developed country. I'm only developing. So where is the diversity? And I'm also accustomed with abundance of, I'm carrying wealth that I'm not benefiting from, And then also we must mobilize finance for just energy transition. We must kill all these fossils, which is also part of disaster resilience. It also, if you link them, the two, they correlate. And you also have the issue of, the critical minerals. We must work together to harness critical minerals, which will lead to inclusive growth and also sustainable development. So Africa is lagging behind in terms of development, and we have a younger population that is ready, energetic. If we pump, a lot of investment into these young people, we'll see, the results really coming into fruition.
All right. So just final question, Michael. What should Africa, and I'm talking about grassroots, grassroots level, people on the street who just know that there's all this kerfuffle. Joburg is being prettied up for this G20 leader summit. Are we going to be left with the vestiges of, and in some cases, unfortunately, it'll come down to that financial mismanagement?
Yes, I think...
and elephant projects, the 2010...
Yes, you saw what
moment,
happened.
yeah.
Just close to us, we have that, gigantic FNB stadium that hosted the 2010 World Cup final. So, yes, it's still functional, but you have others that are sitting idle because we had that 2010 legacy plan, which is something that still needs to be followed to where it ended up to. Like you are talking about grassroots, because that investment is supposed to go to grassroots development in terms of soccer excellencies for young, upcoming soccer players, but also in schools. We don't see these days, the competition, sports being enforced in our schools. So, for the young people, I think, I'm just quoting what the Minister of International Relations said yesterday about the declaration, where he said this is also a moment for African youth where we need investment from Europe or other partners to put more money into the youth who will be working in those mines for beneficiation. We need more youth to be put there, to be skilled on how to work in those areas, in those sectors.
Michael, thank you very much. Michael Mbeo, my colleague who has been here, and not just today, but for the past several months covering G20 events, the working groups, side events, etc., etc. And we now speak to Elizabeth Sideropoulos, Chief Executive of the South African Institute of International Affairs. And she will tell you by her own admission, I've been trying to get her voice on these issues, particularly the G20, because I always find her engagement of these issues quite interesting. The South African government, Liz, so it views its presidency as very unique, a unique opportunity to champion equity and sustainable development by fostering consensus among developed and developing nations. It sees itself as playing, or taking up the role of a bridge between the North and global South. But the question is, does South Africa have the capability? That's the question. Did we find the answer in the declaration yesterday?
Hi, good morning, Tsepiso, and yes, it's very good to be with you this morning.
Finally dragged you into the studio.
I think the first point to make about the declaration is that it was the topics were obviously topics that were important for Africa and the global South. But in the process of negotiating both the final declaration, but also during the course of the various working group discussions, there actually was a lot of collaboration, support across the North and the South for many of the issues that South Africa put on the agenda. So in that sense, South Africa's role as sort of trying to bridge sometimes the diplomatic divides, I think worked. Many countries in the global North indicated right from the start that they wanted to see a strong South African presidency, that they were going to support many of the priorities that South Africa set out. Obviously, from an African perspective, I think there was a lot of support for particularly the high-level priorities dealing with debt, with disaster risk reduction, critical minerals, the food security task force, artificial intelligence, and so on. And the fact that we were able to get a consensus document at the end of the day, I think speaks volumes about South Africa's diplomatic ability. but also the willingness, of course, because it's always a two-way street. The willingness to come of the other countries to come to the table and say, we understand these are very important for South Africa. We support these here. We may want to nuance a little bit because of our own particular national circumstances. But I think overall there was a spirit of cooperation across what sometimes seem like divides.
And it's been interesting to watch, Liz, in terms of and you know, take this picture of mine, Cyril Ramaphosa almost seemingly kowtowing to President Donald Trump while he is waving the finger at him, admonishing him for white genocide. And the Cyril Ramaphosa that we see now, who's actually saying, you're not going to bully us. We're actually going to come out of this with a declaration. And the question I was asking is, they say it's Africa's moment, it's the South African moment. Is it the Cyril Ramaphosa moment in terms of leadership?
I think the comment yesterday morning, which I think took many of us by surprise, because we were all expecting the declaration to be issued today.
Right? I actually thought, I actually fact-checked it a number of times.
I thought, well, what are we doing here now? I mean, the party's over there, I think was really masterful. It seemed to have been, is the sound on? But I think it also reflected, I think, generally the spirit in the room, and the fact that if the G20 had decided that a declaration was not possible because one member had voluntarily decided not to participate at all, I think that would have set a really bad precedent for the G20 going forward. The whole principle of consensus is about countries around the table, and the AU and the EU, countries around the table identifying how they can adopt the different priorities in the declaration in a way that speaks to their national interests and also recognizes the bigger global context. If you're not in the room, can you veto it? Okay. Was that the intention of the consensus principle? And I would argue no, and I would argue that if it is, because certainly some people would see it that way, you then open the door next year, if somebody doesn't like the US presidency, to say, well, we're not going to engage at all. In the US presidency, obviously the US did participate in some of the discussions, particularly in the finance track, so it's not that they opted out completely, but obviously after the Truth Social tweet, or whatever it's called, by President Trump a few weeks ago, they no longer participated in the discussions around the declaration. So I think, in the circumstances, I think everybody agrees that one country shouldn't be able to stop multilateral global processes which are trying to deal with some global challenges where we require international cooperation.
And that is, as you say, the underlying statement about what G20 should be. Multilateral global processes. Ursula von der Leyen saying yesterday that uncertainty is growing, imbalances widening, and dependence are weaponized. But she says, most importantly, so we need cooperation over confrontation, diversification over disruption. And we've seen a lot of European leaders, and we're not talking small country, but powerful European leaders who are here, and powerful leaders of international multilateral institutions. And I don't think it's just about supporting South Africa. It's because they're here to talk grown folk business, if I have to put it like that, Liz. Because I was at the Health Working Group Summit in Limpopo. It didn't come out with a declaration. And one would have thought that health is the one unifying factor. But it's about the language that countries are just disagreeing on, and the commitments that the overall ideological objectives, no, fine, we agree with it, but here's what we want in that statement. And I want to talk about that for those who are going to try and pretend that it's a vanity project, is a pity moment for South Africa, about how real and legitimate these discussions have been.
I think you make a very important point. So we have a declaration which has been, negotiated over many long hours, and I think kudos to our diplomats, but also kudos to everybody else who participated from the other delegations over the course of last week. But the reality, of course, is that the world is moving away, and this is not just about Donald Trump. This has been a trend that simply Donald Trump is perhaps the most acute manifestation of. Moving away from certain principles that we had all accepted even 10 years ago around just the Paris Agreement on climate change, or the Sustainable Development Goals, or the commitment to gender equality and women's empowerment. There is greater division around these issues, and also I think what has happened over the last, not just this year, but even going back to the first Trump presidency, the creation of an enabling environment to be able to say certain things. And so there are real differences. And in the course of the year, we know that there were a number of working groups that were unable to come out with a ministerial declaration. The chair's summary often is not a bad thing. It does reflect both the discussions, but also where there were some areas of consensus, but that they couldn't ultimately take it across the finish line. And sometimes it is really also about, adept negotiators in doing that. But the reality is that we are entering a moment where consensus, not in the narrow G20 sense, but where consensus around certain norms and principles is fast eroding, unfortunately. And part of that is because I think the case hasn't been made sufficiently well to ordinary people, the point that you were also making earlier, about why international cooperation, multilateral processes are actually important, and that they have an impact on their lives. And relatedly, the fact that democratic societies have also seen heightening inequality, which of course was another priority of the South African presidency. We saw the inequality panel. And that the cost of living, people feel that they have been left behind, and they begin to see salvation and solutions in big men. They usually are big men, not women, with ostensibly very easy answers to actually highly complex problems. And that means a turning away from these global frameworks. So why should we sign on to the Paris Agreement and continue to respect it? Why should we think that the Sustainable Development Goals are important, etc., etc.? We'll do our own thing. But we know that global challenges like pandemics, in the context of the Health Working Group, like climate change, how do you deal with disasters, actually have an impact on all of us. Inequality in one country actually also impacts other countries. There are domino effects there. And there is a responsibility, I think, on us, sort of, the chattering classes and governments and elites, to actually be able to deliver more effectively and to make the connections better.
And Liz, I'm actually also thinking being emboldened by the language where there is consensus. Because when we talk about a new EU-South Africa minerals partnership, where it promises mutual benefit. I mean, that is a bold statement, if anything, because we know that the global north has been more about extractive practices, and now Africa is talking about beneficiation. It underscores that as what's going to guide it. how do we ensure that the private sector in those countries actually is held to that promise?
So I think that's an important point, because we can have governments make declarations and make announcements, but at the end of the day, a lot of the economic dimensions of, for example, what's in the critical minerals framework, also in the G20, not only in the bilateral discussion with South Africa earlier and with Africa. These need to be delivered by the private sector in most cases, and of course, it's a two-way thing. And it really, in that instance, depends on the one hand on the kind of environment that you have in country, the kind of policies you have in country, to be able to create opportunities for the private sector to actually create the value chains in partnership maybe with local or with regional players in the economic terrain. Of course, in the context of the African Continental Free Trade Area, one of the things that is important is not to create national value chains, but to actually ensure that you spread the goodies in terms of value benefit of beneficiation. So there is a dimension and a responsibility on African governments on the one hand, to ensure that if investors are coming into their country to mine a particular resource, and it's not just about the so-called green minerals, it can also be other minerals, that there is the opportunity to be able, and it's not sort of prohibitively expensive, to be able to link up with local players, or to bring in other investors who can sort of be part of the value chain. And then on the, because private sector will go where there is money. That's not going to change. It has to be profit driven. I mean, and
there must be clarity, whether it's of policy,
exactly,
certainty in terms of the project itself, and scalability, profitability.
So they need to be bankable, and the regulatory environment needs to be predictable. And we know that these are challenges that African countries, while very context specific, and some are better than others, have to actually face head on. You're not going to bring in the private sector unless there is an environment that actually makes it easy for them to do business. What is that? Well, there's energy. It could be infrastructure, roads, connectivity. It may also be security. So these are all components that African states have to be mindful of. And on the other side, of course, there is potentially also the creation on sort of, say, the European side of an engagement with the private sector, of their own private sectors, about how they work together to advance these. So it's not a simple, we have an agreement and so now this will happen.
Boom, it. And I want to talk about inequality, because I want to look at that report in just a moment. But when we talk about multilateralism being under strain, so with these geopolitical fractures widening, as we're seeing, the fact that China's not here, the fact that Russia's not here, and South Africa finding itself, particularly with that moniker label of non-alignment, post the G20, it must still find its way, and with BRICS, for instance, it must still find its way to nail its colors to the mast, because I don't think that it can choose to be transient depending on who it speaks to in implementing those G20 principles that will be part of the Troika, of that US leadership. So the question is the major powers being absent, the G20 as a platform for global problem solving. Can we now say it has become a collective of parallel national agendas under one roof? So, of course, China, the president isn't here, yes.
Xi Jinping, but of course the premier is.
But it would be an important symbolic moment.
Yeah. And of course, in the case of President Putin, he can't come.
Well, but that is also interesting, because I remember we did that with Sudan's president, al-Bashir. We fought for the fact that he could be here and we weren't arrested.
Yeah. I think that was a different time in South Africa's foreign policy. So I think that has been, you can see that in the declaration, the issue of the, not maybe triumph maybe is too strong and perhaps a negative word in this context, but the importance of national context, national interest, national circumstances. I haven't done a Google's a sort of a search on the PDF for how many times national circumstances or national context is mentioned, but I suspect you'll find it quite a few times. I mean, I sat in some of the discussions, and this came up regularly. So there is, and this is partly a response to what we were talking about earlier, which is rising domestic dissatisfaction with particular policies, and sometimes policies that they believe have been imposed externally. So, for example, issues around climate change and the need to decarbonize, and the cost that may be associated with that, and the impact on particular communities that may be the most affected by decarbonization. So it might be coal communities. So when you come together and try to make a series of commitments, albeit these commitments are not smart, they're not specific, measurable, time-bound, etc. Countries tend to be very, very reticent, even if the commitments are unspecific, to agreeing to something that might be problematic in their own context, or which they see may constrain them in their domestic policy environment. Now, South Africa for a long time, also in the context of some of the rules around the WTO, has always said it's important to maintain policy space, to create policy space. Don't constrain us in what we can and can't do. Now, the G20 is not the WTO, but I think that concern, that reticent sense of saying, well, no, we're not going to talk about the eradication of fossil fuels, okay, because that would be inimical to our interests as an oil producer or a coal producer or whatever.
And our development as an economy.
And our development as an economy.
That's just the reality.
Yeah. So I thought the way in which you described it is an interesting way. As a committed multilateralist, I wouldn't want to be so cynical, but saying it's an umbrella under which a whole host of national interests actually come together, I think is an interesting way of actually seeing it. And I think, notwithstanding the declaration, notwithstanding the desire, I think, by everybody to show that multilateralism can work, that international cooperation is important, I think you are seeing, even in the declaration, those sort of pressure points and tensions that we see on a daily basis in various countries.
Because ultimately we are looking for signs or confirmation of hegemony. And what does, because if we talk about consensus, to me, that's what it would suggest, right? But I know that it's a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more complex than that. It can't just be a single word characterization, and especially as we're talking about the non-binding nature of the G20. But it is the G20. We're going into the G7 after that. We are looking at whether or not there is going to be continuity of that spirit.
Yeah. And next year, I think, will be interesting. I think the agenda is going to be much narrower. There are certain things that are going to completely fall by the wayside. And it will be interesting to see how the US manages the principle of consensus. And I think, there are challenges even in the G7. So in terms of coherence and national interests, I mean, we saw the Canadian G7 summit also sort of because of the disruption end up with a number of a few sort of statements on specific issues, and then a chair's summary. I think it is reflective of the growing contestation, power contestation, the fact that more countries are now in a position to assert and have the power to assert influence and assert that they are not going to necessarily sort of fall into line. And it is, it's domestic pressures that we shouldn't underestimate, and concerns about, so if you talk about inequality, the very real challenges that countries with high inequality face, and how do you address that speedily without having constraints that are brought on by international agreements, or even if they're voluntary. I mean, if you look at the declaration, you can also do a search for voluntary. There is a whole host of voluntary principles, voluntary commitments, etc., from energy to development to digital, whatever, to energy security, and non-binding, voluntary and non-binding. So these are a nice set of principles, but we really don't.
And also depending on the administration,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And I'm glad you went into that, because we're going to take a quick break, Liz. I want us to look into that G20 Extraordinary Committee of Independent Experts on Global Inequality, because this is the first time this has happened, and what does it mean in terms of continuity from some of the themes that the Latin American countries have brought into G20 leadership. We're going to take a quick break. You are listening to Channel Africa, live broadcast from here, G20 Leaders Summit, second day, final day here at Nasrec.
This weekend, South Africa will host the G20 summit at the Nasrec. And real-time insights from the main venue. And so, our regular lineup will be adjusted just a little bit for this weekend to accommodate the G20. On Saturday, the 22nd of November, the Oasis will broadcast for 2 hours. Out and About takes a break for a full look at the G20. After Africa Chart Toppers, our news and current affairs team will bring you special live broadcast in 5 different languages directly from Nasrec. And normal programming will resume at 8 p.m. Central African Time. And then on Sunday, the 23rd of November, the Oasis will also broadcast for 2 hours. Tech Africa steps aside for our news and current affairs teams to bring you special live broadcast in 5 different languages. Then, Planting the Seed resumes from 1 p.m. till 2 p.m. Central African Time. Channel Africa, your window to the continent, connecting you to the world in an African perspective. The world is watching Johannesburg. Leaders from the planet's biggest economies gather to make decisions that shape nations, markets, and futures. You already know, Channel Africa will be right there, bringing you the conversations, insights, and analysis that matter.
The best is yet to come.
The G20 Summit from the 22nd to the 23rd of November. As it happens, from an African perspective. Stay tuned to Channel Africa and get all the G20 analysis.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Deogratus Bwire, wewe kama mkurugenzi wa shirika la kutetea haki za binadamu kutoka kule Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Maandamano yameendelea kwa siku ya pili. Nini kinaendelea?
Kwanza mimi ningependa tusiliweke kama wafuasi wa upinzani. Kwa sababu kiukweli mimi nilipata kidogo kushuhudia watu waliokuwa wanapita barabarani hawakuwa kwa namna yoyote ile wamebeba bendera ya chama chochote cha upinzani.
Umezungumzia swala zima vitu ambavyo havijakaa sawa vinapaswa kurekebishwa. Vitu hivyo ni nini?
Hivyo vitu ambavyo havijakaa sawa tayari nimeshavisema. Unajua kumekuwepo na mtiririko wa matukio mengi sana, watu ambao wanakuwa wanapinga masuala kadha wa kadha ambayo yanaonekana kufanywa na vyombo vya dola kwenye mitandao au hata pia nje, wamekuwa wakichukuliwa hatua.
Darubini ya Afrika kila Jumatatu hadi Ijumaa kuanzia saa 11 kamili hadi saa 12 kamili jioni majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
The world is watching Johannesburg. Leaders from the planet's biggest economies gather to make decisions that shape nations, markets, and futures. You already know Channel Africa will be right there, bringing you the conversations, insights, and analysis that matter.
The best is yet to come.
The G20 Summit from the 22nd to the 23rd of November. As it happens, from the G20 Summit through African eyes, live updates, and expert voices only on Channel Africa.
And the time now being, let's see, it's 15 minutes to 9. It's 15 minutes to 9. I feel like this hour has gone by so quickly. Still so much to talk about. But here we are. We have been looking at day 2 of the G20 Leaders Summit. A declaration has already come out of it. We've been speaking to international relations expert Elizabeth Sideropoulos from SAIA just a few moments ago, and she was saying it's pure mastery that President Cyril Ramaphosa, through his leadership, has already managed to get a declaration out of the summit, even though we are still awaiting the final declaration. Was one of the talking points of social media yesterday. Busiswe Khatebe, SABC's senior producer at Digital News, joins us now to talk about that. Was that something that made it on social media and in a big way?
Yes, good morning, Tsepiso. Good morning to the listeners. It is something that made it on social media, especially seeing that, there were over 100,000 tweets or posts for the G20 summit or G20 South Africa, and they were hailing President Cyril Ramaphosa and saying, you know what, it's good that we didn't focus on the boycott and those who said they're not going to attend the summit, and that it was actually successful, including the French president, UAE and Germany hailing this G20 summit as a success.
And that's big things. And with very due respect to my president, this is the cupcake moment, right?
It is.
That's what South Africa's president
nickname.
The nickname is cupcake.
They were even saying, "Oh, hail Matamela,"
right?
on social media. Yes, and it was very exciting because they were also saying, "We've hosted the FIFA World Cup, we've hosted the Rugby World Cup, and now the G20 summit." People were just saying this is a historic moment.
We know how to do it, right? Pull out all the stops when it comes to. But the sad thing, as Dr. Leboang Pheko was saying yesterday, that we are such a capable state. The sad thing is that it only comes out when we have these big international moments.
Yes.
And is that what people on social media are reflecting on as well?
That's a good point, because someone did actually post, and there was a debate about that with the lights on, with the streets being fixed, that they said our government is capable.
I can do stuff.
It can do stuff, and we're seeing how much they can do for this moment. And some are saying, yes, we wish to see even more post the summit, because the government is capable.
It can do the things that makes the pots to be cooked. A bit of South Africanism there. What else is making trends?
Another thing is the family photo that the world leaders took yesterday. And people are excited about also India and South Africa relations. The Prime Minister of India has been trending since he landed in South Africa, and he continues to trend. People looking at good efforts towards the global South. And yes, it's quite a bit excitement seeing the leaders on the red carpet. And people are just keen to know more about the summit, to the point where PanSouth has released some G20 leaflets in different various South African languages, so that people can have access to the information.
So thank you so much for that update on what's happening in the social media space. It's time now to go to our colleagues in Nigeria. We have been live simulcasting with our Nigerian family, and that is Talks Station. So they have been watching this G20 summit with us, and we are in conversation with my colleagues who are in Lagos, and we are speaking to Kolawole Falodun and Olawoluwa Awe. Am I correct in the pronunciation of your names, colleagues. Good morning. How you day?
Good morning. We day.
You day.
That means we're very good. Good morning to you. And how are you faring?
You know what? We are at the finish line. It's been a very long G20 because it's been going on throughout the year, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, yesterday kick-started despite the odds from yesterday, from the US boycotting to some of the points of focus during yesterday's conversations. It's been a very eventful one, and I'm sure it's a G20 summit like it had never happened before because of how things have panned out so far. But how does it feel over there in South Africa?
The feel is electric. I was actually just thinking about how, when you are part of the media space and it's, it's your lifeblood, you're in this thing. You almost come alive no matter how tired you are. Just seeing colleagues here discussing things amongst yourself as a fraternity. But how is it like in Nigeria? Because it's not happening in Nigeria, but it's very much of interest in Nigeria.
Absolutely. I mean, here in Nigeria, a lot of the themes that are on the lips of a lot of people, I think were quite captured yesterday during the speech from the Vice President. Of course, our President couldn't be there. We had to send a delegation led by the Vice President, Kashim Shettima. And some of the things and opinions and sentiments that really controlled the narrative here was fairly highlighted by the Vice President yesterday, and it was also important to see how the focus also cascaded through the lips of a lot of other African nations, focus on climate financing, focus on debt management and the likes, which is a very key integral thing for a lot of nations who are termed developing in this side of the world. So the focus, which was quite interesting, the global south and its priorities was quite amazing. Olawoluwa is here with me as well, and I'm sure she has a few things to highlight as well.
Yes, one of the things that I would like to highlight would be what the Vice President has stressing that the possession of mineral resources alone does not guarantee prosperity, and relevant authorities and stakeholders must ensure that the extraction and trade of critical minerals are governed by fairness, transparency, and accountability. And the conversation really has been that we know that African countries are very rich in some of those mineral resources that are necessary for global development, technology, here and there. But then how has it really trickled down into better standard of living for an average African? So we're looking forward to some of to the developments that would happen, to the change of thoughts and mindset that would happen around that. I am particularly interested in that. And we also talked about AI. I know it lent our voice to the global conversation when it comes to ensuring that we are still in control of the artificial intelligence narrative. And AI is made in such a way that it is helping us achieve our own goals, not AI using us to achieve. I mean, the people creating and updating this technology using the global masses to push their own agenda. So we look forward to all of the things that will happen as a result of that.
Ola, just on that issue around AI, because the question really is, what are the global rules? Are they going to change, particularly in terms of safeguards and equity principles?
Absolutely, like I said, a lot of the things that really drive the workhouse for AI advancement is domiciled here in Nigeria, in Africa, and that's the reason why I'm quite excited about how the narrative progressed yesterday. Nations who have these minerals that power these machines and chips should benefit immensely from AI and from everything surrounding it in terms of value. So I think the narrative is shifting, but I just want to throw a quick question across to you as well. I'm not there in South Africa, and kudos to the Channel Africa team for covering well so far. How is this whole US boycotting impacting the atmosphere right now in South Africa?
If anything, it has been a source of unity among South Africans. By the way, I think it was a Nigerian brother who said on TikTok that, when it comes to South Africans, once you come for one of them, you bring them closer together. They'll all come for you. And that's absolutely what I've seen. From speaker to speaker at events, they're all emphasizing the fact that we can do this, we will do it, and we'll do it bigger and better. Precisely because of, I think we thrive on difficult moments. I think South Africans really, really do their most when they're facing adversity.
Yeah. It's beginning to look like that could have some sort of impact on the outcomes, the declarations from this year's G20 summit. Do you think that in itself could impact negatively?
I think, and colleagues, unfortunately, we have come to the end of our time. Do invite me to Lagos so we can have a lengthier conversation. But what it is that I think it's also an opportunity for us to stand up for what we commit ourselves to. It mustn't just be talk. The rhetoric ends now, the action begins now.
Yeah, just to come in there, I know I'm joining the show right at the end. This is Nhlanhla speaking, one of the reporters. Just to respond to your question, this is a question that we actually posed to some of the analysts here. If the U.S. not being present at the summit will have any effect on the declaration. And, the analysts are saying it won't. They've had prior meetings before this big meeting that is happening in Johannesburg, South Africa. So the declaration will not affect the fact that the U.S. is not here. So it's all systems go. We await this afternoon when officially the summit will close and we move.
The final declaration.
Yeah.
Nhlanhla, thank you so much. I like the fact that you just came in there and you're like, this is my moment. Because I wasn't finished talking to the Nigerian colleagues. So perhaps let's engage on that. What have been the pivotal moments that are reflected just in South African discourse? And I would like to hear from my colleagues in Nigeria as well. Tell us what has been the reportage, the coverage on G20, just in terms of headlines. So Nhlanhla, we'll start with you and I'll go to the colleagues in Nigeria.
Yeah, what has stood out for me is what you've just alluded to, Tepiso, the unity that is displayed amongst the leaders that are present here. We've seen the president of India, taking to social media, just commending South Africa on its hosting on the successful G20. We also had on Friday the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres addressing the media, commending the leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa. So, all the world leaders that are here are happy with how things are unfolding here, which is amazing. I mean, I was telling my other colleagues, this is one of the biggest events that South Africa has hosted. I mean, we're good with hosting. We've done the World Cup, we've done BRICS, we've done AGOA, but never at this level, never in this magnitude. So, really the unity, the camaraderie that is just amongst these leaders is something worth noting and worth highlighting.
Kola and Ola, I want to say this. It's been something I've been kind of sidestepping, gingerly walking over. There's this crazy rivalry between South Africa and Nigeria, but we actually love each other. What is that about? Tell me, how are people talking about this in Nigeria? Kola, Ola, you still with us? And it seems like unfortunate.
Can you hear us now?
Now we can hear you. Excellent.
Okay. I was saying that it seems like a love-hate relationship, but of course more of love than hate. Mostly when it comes to, we have history we have similar history when it comes to language and culture and governance. So there's that similarity, and I can also sneak in Ghana into the mix. The Anglophone nations have that chemistry. When it comes to sports, we always want to be the better off when two nations like South Africa and Nigeria come together. So I think it's more of positive love-hate brotherhood kind of relationship. But it's more love. It's all love most of the time.
It's more good competitive behavior, isn't it?
Exactly. It's like siblings going at each other, you know.
I mean, we just all like to be winners. And, I like one thing you mentioned earlier. We have a way of working together amidst a common enemy. Where we have like a common enemy, we have like a common issue to tackle. So as long as we know to always do that when it matters, we must stand together.
Yes.
I mean, the sibling rivalry once in a while, that's still nice.
And this is where we ended, but please, colleagues, and my bosses are hopefully listening, and please let's put a date to it. Me coming to Lagos.
I support that.
To come and broadcast with you. Actually loving it, and I appreciate you, and hoping that we're going to do this again soon. Kola Wole, Falodun, and Ola Ola. That's how we come to an end of the simulcast broadcast with our colleagues in Nigeria at Lagos Talks, and Ntlantla Mahlangu, a colleague who has been watching the scene here, giving us a wrap-up of what reporters have encountered on the G20. And that's it for the morning team for the G20 Leaders Summit here out here in Nasrec. Of course, more programming coming out of here. From myself, Tsipiso Makwetla, and the team, goodbye for now.
SABC News.
Africa as the G20 summit wraps up today and several international airlines cancel flights to and from Venezuela. Good morning. I'm Jolani Tulo Webe. French President Emmanuel Macron has commended South Africa for hosting a successful G20 Leaders Summit. The two-day summit, which is being held on the African continent for the first time, will end later today. Macron was speaking to the media on the sidelines of the summit at the Nasrec Expo Center in Johannesburg.
The first G20 summit in our history on the African continent. By itself, it's a great achievement. And I think South Africa can be proud of this achievement. Second, it is as well a summit where African Union has its seat, which is a very important achievement as well, in the recognition of Africa as a whole and Africa as being part of these nations to decide for themselves and for the future.
And now we cross live to our reporter João Pedro Yabala, who is at the venue of the summit at the Nasrec Expo Center. João, an eventful day yesterday with the summit adopting the declaration by consensus. Tell us more.
Certainly, Joalane, good morning, and good morning to all our listeners. As we move into the second and final day of the G20 summit at the Nasrec Expo Center in Johannesburg, it is fair to say that the biggest hurdle has been cleared. As you said, the consensus of the declaration has been adopted. President Cyril Ramaphosa broke with a tradition, and this by tabling the declaration immediately after his opening remarks. And despite strong opposition from the United States, the document was ultimately